You've poured your heart and soul into crafting a story in screenplay form, and against all odds, you've managed to sell it. Not only that, but unlike many screenplays that sell, yours has just been given the green light.
Greenlight!
Buckle up, because that script of yours is about to change. But why, and how, and what can you possibly do about it? That's what I'm going to talk about in this one. In all honesty, your script has already changed a lot just on its way to earning that green light. If you've managed to stay on as the writer, you have definitely by this point executed multiple rounds of notes from producers and executives and probably the director, maybe other people too, such as actors, etc. So let's start with the why for those. Why do those people have all of those notes on your screenplay? Well, let's focus on what their jobs are. A producer's job is to get the movie made. It is also their job to make a movie that people like and that actually makes money, but their primary job is to just get it made. To get it made, you need a lot of things, but the most important thing you need is financing. To get financing, you need a script that the financing production company or financier feels confident in, and you typically need a bankable star. How do you get a bankable star? Well, usually you need a really capable director who those stars feel comfortable working with. So in the earlier stages, a producer's notes are going to be focused on making those three groups of people happy before it ever goes out to any of them. So let's talk about their jobs and what they care about. A financier's job is to make movies that keep their company in the black. They have to make money. If they don't get to make movies anymore. So a financier is going to be focused on making that script as marketable as possible to its intended audience, while also keeping the budget in check. That allows them to get as much bang for buck as possible. They still want to make good movies. First of all, there are just so many better ways to make money than making movies, so it's pretty rare for people to get into this business unless they really love it. But second, if those audiences don't like their movies, those movies are going to bomb. And when a company gets too many bombs in a row, they tend to go bankrupt. So the point is, throughout all those notes about budget and marketability, they're still going to care about making the story work. A director's job is to be the creative leader of the project. Someone needs to be in charge, and by the time the movie's done, they're going to spend way more hours on it than you will, so they're going to be the one who takes your script, crafts their own vision from it, and then does everything they can to execute that vision. A director is judged on many things, but the three that really come to mind are the storytelling, how visually appealing it is, or how cinematic it is, and finally, the performances. So you can expect many of a director's notes to be hyper story and character focused, as well as focused on how you can make the movie more visually appealing. An actor's job is to help a director achieve their vision by bringing a character to life. You may or may not get notes from actors on the way towards getting that green light, but you will definitely be executing notes for the purpose of attaching actors. Some of those notes will be things like how to make those characters more unique and compelling, or how to bring out their arcs more, but some notes might actually be a little bit more technical. For instance, they might sound like, hey, we think Denzel might do this part, but only if he's got 5 more full pages of script. Or it might be the reverse of that. Like your producer might come to you and say, hey, De Niro's agent likes this part for him, but he's only got a week to shoot it. Can you cut that part down to only 1 location? All of this stuff comes before you even get that green light, and it can often take a lot of drafts to get there. So already your script is changing a lot, and that can be really hard when it's something that you've worked really hard on independently for a very long period of time. So before we go any further, let's talk about what a screenwriter's job truly is. A screenwriter's job, at its core, is to write a document that brings on board the producer and the director and the star and the financier who can get the movie made. You are writing the sales document that sells these people on making this movie, and you are writing the plan or the blueprint or whatever you want to call it that they will use to build it. You are showing each of those stakeholders on paper how incredible the movie could be and why they need to be part of it. You need to be able to execute the notes that will get you there. Some of those notes you might actually think are pretty great. Some of them you likely won't. But if you have sold or optioned the rights to your script and the buyers don't think that you can deliver a draft they'll like, they're probably gonna hire another writer to do it. And now, when you could have at least had some influence on guiding the shape of the movie that follows, you will have 0. So what can you do to ensure a best case scenario here? First of all, when you sell or option a script, do everything you can to get the first opportunity to rewrite it. This means that if they choose to hire someone for a rewrite, they have to hire you first. I cannot stress enough how important this is. All of these places have writers they already like, who they trust to come in and do rewrite jobs for them. They might believe that your script could make a good movie, but if they think that it requires substantial enough changes, they might not believe that you can be impartial enough to deliver on those. So why pay you when they can just pay somebody they already know can handle it? That first opportunity to rewrite ensures that you have a chance to prove what you can do. And if you do a great job, they may just keep you on for future revisions. Now, in a WGA deal, because the guild fought hard for this, you automatically get that in your contract, and that's amazing. For many writers, their first deal will not be guild. This might come as a shock, but it's pretty common for WGA signatory production companies to also have a separate arm or another company that is not signatory, simply so they can hire writers without having to deal with the guild. It's kind of frustrating, but it's also just a fact of life for many writers who are starting out in their careers. If you get a non-guild deal, it's very possible that they won't want to give you that first opportunity, so do whatever you can to negotiate for it. That's what I did on Aftermath. It was a non-guild deal that paid pretty close to guild prices, so it wasn't bad at all. But I had to make some concessions to ensure I would stay on as the writer. I had seen a lot of friends get booted off of their first movies, and I didn't want that for me, so I was more than willing to do it. So here's what I wound up doing. I ultimately agreed to do that first rewrite for free, provided that if they wanted to have a second revision done, they had to hire me for that one. It was below guild prices, but it was still paid, and more importantly, it gave me 2 opportunities to show them what I could do. And apparently, I did well enough on both of those that they hired me for a third rewrite, and that was the one that got us the green light. Although the director did a pass, which is common, I was the only writer who was hired to write on the movie. I retained sole credit, and even though the movie itself is pretty different than the original script that I optioned, staying on the movie allowed me to keep a lot of that same spirit in there and retain a lot of what I loved about it. So it was absolutely worth doing whatever I needed to do to make that happen. So you might ask, if I had to change that much of the script, how did I feel about the notes that I had to execute? Well, let's talk about the first rewrite I did, because that was the biggest one. Right off the bat, and I have no problem saying this, some of those notes were really good. And if you get good notes, check your ego at the door and celebrate it, because at the end of the day, it ends up being you who looks good for executing them. Some of the notes I might have preferred not to execute, but I understood the logic behind them. These might include things like trimming a sequence so it would cost less to shoot, or finding a more budget-friendly way of achieving the same beat in a story, or like I already talked about, fleshing out a role so that we could bring on a name actor. There was a handful of notes that I have to admit I just didn't really understand. I didn't see what they added, and I felt they kind of took away from the story. Notes like that do happen pretty much with every movie, and unlike when you're getting notes on a spec, they're coming from people who own the rights to your script. Again, if you don't execute a draft that they like, they'll just find somebody who will. Or worse, the movie won't get made at all. So what do? You can ignore those notes and just execute the ones you agree with. Depending on how big those notes are, you might get away with it. After a few weeks, people are reading with fresh eyes and things are still going to be different, so they might just forget about the ones that you didn't bother with. I know writers who've pulled this off, but it's risky if you want to stay on the movie. I didn't want to risk that, and I honestly had no idea what else to do. So I called a friend of mine who has done some big movies and shows, and he said that at the end of the day, your job is to be the guardian of the story. Yes, you have to be a collaborator, and yes, you have to do what you're hired to do, but you also need to guard the integrity of the story. You are a professional writer. No one else will do that better than you will. And if you're really struggling with a note, you bring that up and you explain what the problem is. So here's what I did. First of all, when we had our notes call, I listened to everything with as open a mind as possible, and when I didn't quite get something, I would just ask for clarification. If I still didn't get it, I'd be like, okay, cool, let me think on that and see what I can do with it. After a few days, when I was still struggling with a few of them, I got in touch with the producer and I told him that I had tried to make those notes work, but I was still finding them to be a challenge for X, Y, and Z reasons. And because no one sets out to make a bad movie, he heard me out. On a couple of those, he got what I was saying and he said to go ahead and try the draft without them. On a couple others, he did say that they were basically deal breakers, either for him or executives at the production company, and I needed to find a way to make them work. So that was a big win in the sense that I was able to plead my case and ignore a few notes without risking my involvement, but I was still left with a couple that I had no idea how to execute. So what did I do with those? Well, it's pretty simple. I realized that Aftermath was my best shot at launching a real career and seeing one of my movies get made, and I knew that I wanted to be involved as long as possible. So I decided that whether I qualified as one or not, I was going to play the part of a professional screenwriter, and I was going to find a way to make those notes work. I told myself that there had to be a way, and if somebody was going to get paid to find it, then it was going to be me. It was hard work. I ended up needing to cut a number of scenes and add a bunch of new ones, and I had to add a brand new major character who had a really big impact on the story, as well as a bunch of minor characters. By the time I was done with that first rewrite, I had written about 60 brand new pages and I'd cut about 65. Some of those reflected what was there previously, but it was definitely new material. But it still felt like me, it still maintained many of my favorite parts of the script, and honestly, I think that draft that I turned in was better than the one that they optioned. And even though my execution of those notes was much different than what they expected, they loved it, and they hired me for 2 more rewrites as other people came on board, and both of those ended up being a whole lot less work. So that is the type of thing you might end up experiencing on your way to getting a green light. You might not have to change as much as I did, or you might have to change even more, but either way, your script is going to change. After that green light, it is going to change again, and again, for like a bizarre number of reasons. Here are a few of them. Personalities will be part of it. As more people come on board in pre-production and then into production, they will have ideas, and some of those will find their way into the movie. If you're lucky, they mesh really well with the script that you wrote and the director's vision, and they just make everything better. Budget will continue to be a factor. This or that thing will cost more than expected, and that money needs to come from somewhere. Often it means cutting things in the script or at least making them cheaper. On-set logistics also have a big influence. If you suddenly find that you can't get the right location or a prop doesn't function right, you might not actually have a second chance, and so some revision is necessary. Similarly, on-set flashes of inspiration happen all the time, as they should happen when you get a bunch of exceptional creators together. Actors might come up with a better version of your dialogue. The director might see the set or a prop and have a better idea of how to make use of it. The stunt team is going to take your action and elevate it. And hopefully all these things work well within the broader context of the movie. But either way, they will happen. And finally, there are just gonna be weird acts of God, for lack of a better term. Maybe an expensive set gets destroyed and can't be rebuilt due to time or money or both. Weather has caused impromptu rewrites for many a production. If one actor gets sick and 3 more get exposed and you have to move out of your set before they can come back, what are you gonna do? You have to find a way to make it all work. Everyone goes into making a movie with a plan, and much of that plan is the script. But as the famous saying goes, no plan survives contact with reality. These kind of things happen on pretty much every movie. You can't stop them, and when you think about it, it's pretty amazing that we ever get good movies at all. But we do get them. So I've got 2 recommendations. First, when it comes time for negotiations, make sure you've got a good attorney or agent on your side. Make sure you get paid enough that it'll take some of the sting away if these things happen, and if they make the movie worse, and if you couldn't even do anything to improve them because you weren't kept on the movie to begin with. Hold out for a number that will at least make it easier to work on the next thing. And again, if you've got a good attorney or agent, they're going to be able to help guide you through that. My next recommendation is to do everything you can to stay on the team. That means being a professional and collaborating and meeting deadlines and just offering to help however you can. I wasn't needed after the green light on Aftermath because Patrick, the director, is also a writer, and he felt comfortable that he could take it from there. And to his credit, I actually really liked most of the changes that he made. But I told the producers early on that I was always happy to help however I could. And when we were in post and they wanted to change some things with ADR, I was invited to write a few new lines. So in addition to getting to see the rough cut of the movie, I had a chance to help continue to shape it, and I was super grateful for that. And although I haven't seen the final cut yet, everything I'm hearing is that it's working pretty great. We had a lot of those types of things come up and cause the script to change, but sometimes when everybody's on the same page and working toward making the same movie, some of those changes can wind up being pretty cool. And that's part of what makes this whole filmmaking thing magical. So if you want to write movies for a living, accept that change is part of the job and embrace it. Yes, it's part of the job, but it's still a pretty cool fucking job. I just realized that I didn't come up with some built-in or clever way to ask you to like and subscribe on this one, But if you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please do those things. They have an impact on who sees these, and they also make it more likely that you will see the next one. Thanks so much, everyone, and all the best with your own writing.